Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming back for day two. For those of you who missed yesterday, we'll be again going through some elements of the trial today, and welcome to you today. One of the things that, for those of you who were here yesterday, obviously we experienced some technical difficulties, and the online courtroom project, when we sat down last night and looked at this, we tried to discuss sort of the nature of what was going on. And one of the things that occurred to us is that one of the difficulties that we're encountering that the courts, I think, need to look at very clearly is basically it's an architecture issue. And the truth is that these platforms that we're using, whether it be Zoom, whether it be the Adobe Connect or WebEx or some of the BlueJeans, some of these other platforms, a lot of them are meant and designed for either meetings or seminars. So they're constructed architecturally for essentially some very specific purposes. And as we looked at this, one of the things that occurred to us is that the courtroom and the justice system has really an entirely different structure. And there may be components of that which fit into that meeting or that seminar type of presentation mode. But as we struggle to figure out which platform will work best, that's one of the things that we have continues to find challenging as we're working through this. For example, yesterday, one of the reasons that we chose that particular platform is on some of the other demonstrations we've seen in the voir dire process. In Zoom, for the most part, there's a lot of tiles, and sometimes those tiles tend to move around a lot, making it difficult for the attorneys to track where the jurors are. And also, so we said, okay, can we find a platform where we can fix the tiles and then bring in groups of jurors one by one or in smaller groups so that the attorneys can actually only see a limited number of jurors, be able to see their body language a little more clearly, and also question them and have a little bit more intimacy in questioning those jurors. And I think from the feedback from both Dan and Jillian yesterday, that was achieved. So that was a positive outcome, but obviously we had some connection problems. There was also a sense that there's more candor from the jurors when they're in their own home environment. I think one of the big takeaways that we've discovered is that that any court system really needs to look at more of a customized approach, because there are some features of a webinar, there's some features of a meeting, but there's also some features that aren't offered in any of these platforms that probably need to be considered. And that's where the invitation comes to some of these platforms to start designing a system actually for the court system, because the court system has very specific procedures, there's confidentiality issues, there's security issues. So a lot of this has to go into the mix as they are trying to, and the legal profession is grappling with, how do we start moving into online courtroom procedures? I think you're going to find today there might be smoother in terms of some of the connection issues, but there are some trade-offs with Zoom that we'll talk a little bit about as we go through today. I think another thing to keep in mind here has to do with also how we deal with just technology in general. When we go to courthouse, we expect to be waiting around sometimes for jurors to show up, for a judge who may be on a conference call, for things that might be late. But with technology, obviously, we are very impatient. We really like things quickly. And when things don't happen immediately, we get very impatient. So there's a number of things, obviously, to keep in mind. What we saw yesterday also has to do with keeping in mind also tech smoothness. Obviously, there's got to be a lot of training, a lot of choreography involved with the movement of jurors, with how the presentation of evidence gets presented in court, and how that's choreographed, given the expectations that we all have about technology these days, because we also don't want that disparity if one side's PowerPoint works and another side's PowerPoint doesn't work. Those are all things that we need to keep in mind. So these are all things as we move through the day that I think we should be tracking as we're looking at the presentation of evidence. And with that, I'm going to conclude my remarks, turn this over now to the tech bailiff and Judge Rao to give some instructions to those jurors about specifically how they're going to be listening to the evidence today. So we look forward to your comments, and I'll turn this over to Judge Rao at this point.